Okay, so we got a new sequence randomized there. Looked at the arrears, and right now, Spain is thinking I might be willing to give away a prestige. They have 3, 6, 7, 8 prestige. Oh, 8? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 prestige. Sorry, that's not as good. And 24. Well, 24 is right on the edge. If I could drop that down and maybe give away a couple of debt, make things a little cheaper, getting rid of a prestige might be worth my time. I'm having trouble finding other people who are really interested in a deal. You might catch the Dutch willing to give them another card. They've only given them a 3. So if I had another 3, I could definitely give that to them. But if I give them the 4, I'm losing the opportunity for the 4. If I give them the 2, I'm lowering their value. That's assuming that they don't trade those commerce cards. Anyone can reduce the Dutch. If the Dutch look like they're going to win, now obviously France doesn't want to do that, but everybody else is fine with it, you know. So it's very, very hard, I think, for France or Austria to win the game. But France in particular, the Dutch are a potential weak spot unless they're doing really well. Now they're probably going to do really well because they're at peace. But that's one factor with their trade cards. Otherwise, it's kind of hard. You know, I'm looking and I'm like, everybody looks like they're doing okay. I don't want to get to calculations. I kind of, maybe in this one, I'll start edging, you know, to figuring that out. But I feel like if you start over calculating this game, you make it less fun. And then what happens is you try to make it into a more competitive experience. And if you make it into a competitive experience, that's just not what the game's about to me. Like, the fact that 5 out of the 6 players can win the game is, to me, it is a sign of, yeah, you know, we're kind of more in a role-playing experience than a competitive, you know, trying to win game. Now, obviously it's not really role-playing, but, you know, whatever. It's something that's more about the experience than it is about this kind of trying to balance out and figure out, well, did I win better because only 2 people won instead of 3 or whatever? I don't know. Make up your own decisions as to what's better. You got the rules. Beyond that, everything else is just made up. Essentially, the Spanish were unable to find any takers who would take their deal at the prices they want. Basically, Sweden was an option, able to go from 2 to 3 on the table. Oh, what about Bavaria? Bavaria might always be a possibility. Bavaria is at 15. I didn't really think about them. They'd be going up to 1. They would have the same price. I mean, they might be willing to do it for a debt, but again, Spain doesn't really gain anything if they give this away for a debt. So, you know, unless they're giving away 2 debt, it doesn't seem worth it, and nobody seems too interested in that deal. So, and part of it has to do with the fact that France and the Dutch are both sitting on odd numbers on this chart, which means that getting 1 prestige doesn't actually directly help them this turn, so it's less valuable to them. So yeah. So then we go on to actually doing the arrears this turn in the proper place. Okay, so I did the arrears and the recruitment, and this is where we're sitting for anybody who wants to try to picture and track what's going on. I don't think anybody cares about that. Goes to the roll for Italy, which is again just a mechanical action, really. There's a lot of units on the board. 2, 4, 6, 8. Spain actually, that's doubles, we re-roll. So it's 2. Spain is going to pay their 2. They're not really thrilled about this, but they might be able to get more units off somebody else. That's probably cheaper than taking debt at this point. At all points, you know, pretty much. I find it really hard to take debt. roll for gold for Spain that's automatic, so we get another prestige. There's only one left in the pool, which is important, because when battles are fought, one transfers, but if the loser doesn't have any, this one gets eaten up. So there may not be one available for Spain for next turn. Okay, but now they're at the 8 or more table, which is pretty much where they want to be. The trade for the Dutch. Oh, I forgot to put my Dutch fleet in there. Yeah, we want that in there. We get a guaranteed. Do we want 2 cards? So see, we're going to chance things and keep a couple of units in the pool. These reduce debt at a 2-for-1 cost, so they are somewhat useful to us. And since our notional army is allowed to be there, we're collecting up cards. We don't necessarily want more cards. It's always good, but we don't get any. Oh well, that sucks. But anyway, that puts us to the unrest point, and now it's time to think about trades again, I think. Tied up in the deal making as we're getting close to the end, it's getting closer to where, hey, we want to make sure things are right? So Austria is saying, wow, Spain's doing pretty well in terms of the troops here. But I'm a little worried about their debt. Yes, they have a lot of prestige. They have a lot of advantages there. They've got a card, but I would like them to have more armies because France can throw 8 armies down there like they did last time. So let's keep France equal. So I'd like to get maybe one of my armies and one of Bavaria's armies into Spain's hands. But how do I do that? What do I give Bavaria? Well, I can give Bavaria a liberty. They sure want that because that has to be greater than the tolerances. So I have to kind of give a liberty to Spain, to Bavaria. So I'm trying to look at a deal for Bavaria that I can put together, which might be something like, you can have, I don't know, the Rhenish Palatinate is a little far, but let's say I give you Moravia, which is far from, Bavarian territory, but who cares? I can give you Moravia, which, because you're going early in the turn, means you'll be Catholicizing 2 more things. That'll drop tolerance way down. That's really sweet for you. And I can afford that because my victory cards, my territory threshold's 14. There's like 12 territories on the board. Oh, fuck. Yeah, it's territories. There's like 12 territories on the board that are held by other people right now. Of course, if I don't have armies, I can't do as much. That could certainly get me this army, there's no question of that, but maybe something else, like I give Bavaria some of my debt. Of course, I gotta make sure Bavaria wins the game, but Bavaria is very interested in the liberties greater than tolerance, and their claims plus liberties is greater than debt, is the combination that I need to make. I think I'd be helping a lot by giving them those 2 tolerance reductions, which I can't just grant them. Sweden or the Dutch would have to do that, but I can give them territory that they will Catholicize. So that's looking like a possibility in play. Now, France is also trying to pad their own nest. They feel like the Dutch are doing okay, but they're a little worried about the Swedes. This is always the case. The Swedes have a big enough army, but are they good enough? Well, claims plus tolerance has to be greater than debt. They've only got 4 claims. Tolerance right now is at 2. If we see it shift down, wow, that's going to be ugly. I did not want to buy the card. I decided, or I'm thinking that I'm going against the card right now. Now, pretty obviously, Austria is not going to make its move until after that phase is done. But, yeah, I'm thinking units are too important. So unless I'm going to get units during this period, which doesn't look like I've got a chance of, except maybe by taking on debt, like maybe I could get some of the Dutch units or something. Ooh, half of these are gone. If I could take some of the Dutch units on, that might help. But things are looking pretty iffy, and this is going to be my last military phase. So if I'm going to win in the Netherlands, what do I need? Well, 2 switches would give me the tie, which is enough to win. So I've got to take two territories. So I've got to go military this turn. It doesn't really help me to play around with liberties and tolerances. I'd love to help Sweden and the Dutch at the same point, but I just can't afford to be the one funding it. The Dutch don't really care about Sweden. They do care a little bit about liberties. But they're more interested in getting their trade agreements out, which everybody kind of wants. I'm just having trouble getting anything for them, because everybody knows I want to get them out. Well, whatever. So I think the cards are not going to get drawn again this time, just because of France feeling too poor. And then I'll probably kick off that Catholic deal, and then we'll see if anything else happens from there. I just wanted to try to capture some of the thinking that's going on here. This is very different from the last time I played. Last time I played, there was a lot more military going on. And that was generating some interesting aspects. Things were looking really bad, like nobody wanted to cut a trade. Finally, Austria agreed. 1 debt and Lusatia in exchange for that unit. And then they gave both units to Spain in exchange for Spain's commerce card. Because the way things are going with the Dutch, it looks like those commerce cards are going to be traded around pretty easily. And Austria's like, the more resources I have in my hand, the easier I can try to align. So if Bavaria is doing poorly, I can help them. If Spain's doing poorly, I can help them. We'll figure it out, I can take debt or whatever from them in exchange for that. We don't have anything worked out yet on the Protestant side, however, and that's getting ugly. So the French are probably okay with their military. The Swedes are okay with their military. The Dutch have an extra one. Can they give some debt and a unit to help the French here? Well, the French are kind of like, I don't know how valuable that is. There would be the opportunity. You know what? Instead of Lusatia, I'm going to swap Comte for Lusatia. That doesn't necessarily help the Austrians much, but it gets another pip in here, another claim in here for the Bavarians, which I find more freeing. And that 1 point... Wow, there are things outside. I wonder what they are. I'm curious what that is. Kind of worried about it, actually. Better go see. All right. Anyway, so far the Protestants haven't done anything, and I'm going to go see what the hell's going on out there. Spain having a free space from the commerce they gave to Austria. The Dutch are able to work out a deal. Hey, you 2 debt for this? Yeah, sure. Dutch want to make sure they get their commerce cards out. I still have another one out there, which I'm willing to trade 1 debt for, to anyone who doesn't have one yet. But of course, the other players can screw me over still, and that's the problem with these commerce cards, is you can really hose the Dutch's plans. The problem is, well, see, here's the thing. The Spanish can trade this away with 4 debt, and they break even, and hurt the Dutch. And that's where the world turns ugly. And you can do it in the final step of the last diplomacy, just before the end of the game thing. So unless you've made a deal on that diplomacy turn, that you will not do that. That's the key, and that's where things get kind of ugly. But I'm having a lot of trouble figuring anything that I can do at this point with these alliances. Of course, the Dutch will probably be pulling 2 more cards. But if everything gets consolidated into one player, 1, 2, 3, 4, I've got 3 in my hand. I can deal those 3 out with promises not to exchange them at cheap price or whatever. So I probably don't really want to trade this away the way I traded away the Spanish one. I don't know. I really don't know. I think we're done. And I think it's time to divide up the armies. And everybody's set. Nobody traded away any position. That took a lot of time. What about the Bavarians? Well, one nice thing with the Bavarians is that they've just converted 2 more areas to Catholicism, which is big. They still have a big army. The Swedes have a fairly big army. I can't take Pomerania because that is, well, first of all, I only have 1 disc, but it's also Austrian owned, so I'd have to trade something right now. I could give away a Palatinate or something like that. In exchange, I can't enter Mecklenburg because that's home for Sweden. So in order to gain anything that's really worthwhile, I kind of have to fight the Swedes. I don't know. Let me think. As far as I'm concerned, this is a 50-50. I either go in and hit the Swedes here. That doesn't really help me. The best I get is one thing off of it. So yeah, I think the only thing I can do is move here. The Swedes can intercept me, but that's not particularly good for them. So the Bavarians will take that. And now we'll move back to Brandenburg, and we're done. What I can do is I can trade the Austrians that extra Pomerania, get that Pomerania for one of the Catholic areas, or already Catholic areas that I have. So that takes that. The Spanish, unfortunately, are going before. The Dutch, who don't have an army, have a space on here. So that's actually something they could have traded away pretty easily. The Spanish don't have much they can do. No guts, no glory, or stand where I am. I'm just going to stand where I am. And I guess try to win. I mean, no matter what, I can only win on an attack. But right now I have the advantage. Let's force the French to change that. Weaken their own army. To the Dutch, they don't do anything. To the French. French march into Flanders. I let them take 1. They're going to go for a second. Here is where I have to come in. Because if they take a second, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 to 1, 2, 3, 4. It's tied. I don't want to allow that. In I go. The French feel like they have the advantage in this battle, even though they're 1 less. They're at a 14 strength. The Spanish are at 8 plus. Whoops. They lose. And they lose 6 armies in losing. And they lose a prestige. And they fall back. Send them back to Hainaut. And the French are allowed, with no losses, to replace Flanders. And now Spain is in trouble. This is what military is good for. This army was intercepted, so it's done. That puts us to this army. It's a 7. Austria and Bavaria are both weakened. I don't believe I get taxes under the normal circumstances. Let me just check. The taxes that France gets have nothing to do with their particular claims. They have to, well, aren't only their claims. They're the not Austria. Their whole point is fight Austria at this point. So So they don't care about Catholicism. They don't care about much of anything. What would we need to defeat? Well, the Austrian army is weaker. The Swedes probably don't care too much about the Austrians. So, but we do care about weakening someone. All right. We can't just go flying across the board anyway. But we have a decent size army. Why don't we take something big? let me check the Austrian victory conditions. Yeah, I'm better off looking in the rules. So the Austrian taxation rules. This is the kind of thing that you gotta look and think about. Austria, the number of areas that do not possess any claims, and the French are the number of areas, not territories. So it's kind of a weird situation. Places like this are particularly painful to the Austrians, so certainly they want to, make an exchange. Bavaria. So this is interesting. I think the French want to move. The Bavarians don't really care too much whether Austria or France wins, as long as they're doing okay. However, if Austria can't win, they might not be as interested in supporting their allies. If they know they can't win. So there is that as a possible thing. Where do I go? I'll go into the... I can't block anything off. Yeah, I'll go into the Palatinate. And the Austrians do not want to do anything about that. So we'll put a French control marker there. And there are a lot of French control markers. The French will go back to Comte. We're going to need an army later. Nobody can interfere with them there. And then they'll shoot their way back up to Alsace because that gives them the most flexibility. Okay. And that puts it on Austria, who does not have a big army. The Swedes have a bigger army. The French are a little weaker. Do I want to just take things from the French? Or do I want to fight the French? Those are my two big options. Fighting the French, I'd be at 6 plus 2 dice versus 10. That's pretty good odds. If I beat the French, really good things happen. Let me think. What's no good about this? If I move into the Rhenish Palatinate, the French can intercept me. They're the attacker. If I move into Alsace, I'm the attacker, and that's as far as I get. I could destroy the French army that way. The Swedes are too powerful. I don't want to screw with them. So I'm going to march here. And I think the French will let me because they would be... Well, now wait. 12? Yeah, they would be attacking at bad odds. So there we go. An Austrian? The Austrians could keep going. That's a high-risk move. I don't feel like they're that behind the 8 ball. I think they actually feel like they're doing better than the French. The only problem is the Spaniards. I'm a little worried about the Spaniards. I'm a lot worried about the Spaniards. Crap. Odds do I take the chance on the French and attack them? I do not. So that means I'm going to withdraw after this, and Is there anywhere I particularly need to defend? All I'm facing is the Swedes right now. I'm going to move up to Brandenburg to join him. That gives me, I believe, both armies in defense, which takes an option away from the bigger Swedish army. It's not a big option, though. That puts us on the Swedes. Well, now, and it's important that there's no military phase coming after this. This is the last military phase of the game. And the Swedes are kind of free to act. Of course, their army will get defeated if I'm not real careful. I don't see anything that I can do to prevent myself from being intercepted. So what I'm thinking here was, okay, look. I mean, I can take Holstein for free if I take Munster. But Munster's not worth anything tax-wise to me. And that's kind of a problem. If I take Hesse, Thuringia, which is worth nothing to me, but I can trade it away in the next diplomacy phase, maybe to the French, and Rhenish-Palatinate, all of this back here becomes good space for the French and Swedes. Interesting. I don't feel like I'm doing very well with the Swedes. I am going to take the chance. I go in. I go into Thuringia. Anybody want to intercept? Only one person can. Austria has first option, and then the Bavarians. The Bavarians are a little stronger, but they don't really care what Sweden's doing there terribly. There's nothing for them to lose up here. Of course, Austria is getting pissed. The Austrians say no. Another Swedish conquest. Into the Rhenish-Palatinate. Okay. This is my last chance to stop them. I will lose Holstein and possibly more. Stuff that can be traded away. Can't have this. All right. Austria has to intercept. Now, the Swedes are in an interesting position here. They don't necessarily have to fight, but they're on the defensive. They might as well. So they've got a defense of 6 to 5 plus, well, defense of 12 to 5 plus the dice for the Austrians. 12 to 12. That means the attacker did not win. We each lose one army, or one unit. The Austrians have to fall back. We'll pull them back into Franconia. Oh, no, Franconia is not nearby. We'll pull them back to Württemberg, but that stops the Sweden. Sorry, not the Swiss, the Swedes. It starts with an S. That does stop the Swedes, but they've conquered a bunch of stuff. Maybe not the stuff they wanted, but stuff all the same. And we'll see what that happens in the diplomacy. But they're done now. And we're up to the last diplomacy turn of the game. And this is going to be the turn where really kind of keeping an eye on those victory conditions becomes more and more important. And where the final deals are cut. And the important thing is, the first important rule, although depending on how you judge the victory conditions, the first important rule is kind of, let's make sure somebody loses who's not me. Like there's something upstairs. What the fuck? All right. And the second rule is, but the other way of looking at it is, wouldn't it be great if I was the only person to win, if I could arrange that? So those are kind of the two things, which way do you want to win? Which way is more valuable? Who knows, right? Does it matter if you win with 4 other people? but it's easier to, arrange? Or is that coup of like making sure that everybody wins and you have the most victory points, so you're the only person who wins, so much better? I don't know. I really don't know. I think if you're doing really well and you know that you're running away with the game, then you do try to make everybody else win. But the problem with that is there's 6 players in the game, right? If you try to do that, the other 4 players might gang up to try to prevent one person, probably France or Austria, right? They're the easiest to fail, to lose. And then you end up sharing it in a 5-way victory, whereas maybe you could have organized a 3 or 4-way victory instead. And how do you evaluate that? I don't know. Again, it's up to your own tastes to evaluate what it means to win this game and what it doesn't. My feeling is countries that win are doing good. Countries that lose, things are going bad. If everybody wins, it basically means I don't know what. I really don't know what that means. Because to me, what that would mean is everybody's kind of gotten what they wanted, and that should be the basis for a lasting peace, and everybody should kind of be okay. But that doesn't really make sense. So then, instead of the Westphalian lasting peace that did actually occur, what you probably are looking at is a situation where the one person has put themselves in a position that although everybody got what they want, that one person got enough more that somehow, even though it's a more balanced victory, Europe has become destabilized or something. I don't know. I really don't know how to evaluate and try to explain the victory conditions to this game. I would rather not think about them, because if I think about them too hard, it's not going to work for me. So, back after a bit of a break because I've been a little ill. I've been ill for about 6 weeks now. And I've got my suspicions that, hey, maybe I've got coronavirus before it became really the fright, or flu or whatever. But it's been something my wife and I have been passing back and forth, and I got hit for a few days. So anyway, did the initiative, and I'll have more on that on another video. An initiative phase is done. We're ready to do the last diplomacy phase. This is the last chance to change things, basically, because this is just scoring. There's not going to be another military phase. There's no army's units just count for being able to reduce debt. Every 2 units, I believe, reduces debt by 1. We've been away from the game for a while, so I'm not as up on it as I should be, probably. Right about to go into the arrears. This is an important phase because if you're at a borderline on the arrears table, you might be able to cut a trade that helps both people. That's always the case, but at this point, we're right at the end. So a couple of people on the borderline might be able to, maintain a debt reduction. If anybody's definitely kind of winning the game, and I think the Dutch are in that position, debt is less than the value of trade agreements. Well, I've got a fair amount of debt, and if those trade agreements get consolidated, I won't be winning. But if they don't, and this is kind of why the game's kind of weird, right? Everybody could kind of ensure that the Dutch don't win. Obviously, France does not want that to happen. They're going to try to ensure that they don't trade their trade agreement away, but other people might be interested in preventing the Dutch from winning by trying to collect those. There still might be the capacity to reduce this debt enough, though. So just some thoughts to keep in mind, and I'll come back with any changes that happen during this, or if they don't, I'll just come back with what the situation is after the arrears is handled. I noticed right away, Austria's got a problem. Their territory threshold's 14. They're at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. They got to get 2 territories back to have any chance of winning. So they're in kind of a panic. They cannot win the game if they can't get a couple territories back. They've been kind of loose about letting them go. Well, the Swedes took a lot of territory recently, I guess, and we're really worried about that. France is looking at some kind of agreement. Remember, agreements are binding for the diplomacy and the military phase that follows. There's no military phase, but they can cut a deal with, say, Sweden, saying, look, I'll do something for you, but you can't trade away, you can't trade to gain or get rid of your trade card. And they can formalize something like that, trying to make sure that the Dutch win. And I'm considering giving a prestige away, which doesn't matter a lot to me, maybe with a debt, which won't matter a lot to Sweden, that balances out, in exchange for something like that. But it's a hard trade. It really is. Likewise, we might be interested in maybe taking the Ringia, although the French don't really need it. They're happy enough with Sweden having it. So there's a lot of opportunity here right now in terms of the edge cases. The only ones who are sitting on the edge, France can trade away a prestige without it hurting their debt collection. Sweden could gain one and it would reduce their debt collection by one. So they could gain one of those from France. Now that would hurt France a little bit, but would also help Sweden a little bit. Sweden looks like they're in pretty good shape, but they have to worry. Claims plus tolerance is greater than debt. And now there's other issues here at play too, like Bavaria. Bavaria has to make sure liberties is greater than tolerance for their victory conditions. So for Austria to win, they have to make sure Bavaria wins. So they have to work on any deals like that. I was considering, with Austria, giving some tolerance to the Swedes in exchange for territory. But that's dangerous. I have to also give some liberties to Bavaria, maybe in exchange for a territory. And of course, Sweden's not terribly interested in one tolerance. They probably want to get rid of something else, like a debt. A lot of stuff going on here where it's this kind of balance, and it really becomes kind of tricky here. But Austria definitely needs to make a move right now. Sweden doesn't care so much about the tolerance, but Bavaria becomes very sensitive if that tolerance goes up. Just that kind of stuff is in play here. So it's going to be hard for me to capture all the finagling that's going on, because I've got to do that kind of off board or off video, just because of the nature of my die rolling. In this early stage, what's happened is Sweden has agreed not to trade for or away their trade card in exchange for one prestige and one French debt. That's going to net them a bonus, because that extra prestige. So the debt doesn't cost them anything because they get the extra prestige. But that extra prestige will reduce their debt by one. And the French are coming out kind of even out of this, which is fine for them because they got rid of a debt. Although they're actually losing one debt. They're gaining one debt net because they won't have that prestige at the end of the game. That's the only change that's taking place here, and now I'll assign those points. The other changes are all kind of in the works talking about. So the Dutch are talking about, okay, look, Bavaria, I will give you one of my two trade cards. Again, if you promise neither to trade for, or, either to trade to gain or to get rid of one of the trade cards. And likewise with Austria, I'll give you one of them in exchange for that. That'll kind of freeze things, because with Sweden locked in, with Austria and Bavaria, if they're locked in, France isn't going to try to hurt the Dutch, so the Spaniards will be the only ones with the ability to trade for or against, to get rid of their trade card, which means the Dutch are in pretty good shape with that kind of agreement in place. It's not solidified yet, only the Swedes are locked in, but we kind of know what's going on there. If France wasn't cutting that deal, then Sweden and Spain would be able to consolidate their trade cards, and that would be a problem. So here's where we sit at the end of this in terms of debts, prestige. Now it's time to roll for Italy, which is just a mechanical operation. Three. Losing units is definitely the better thing, but Spain doesn't have a lot of units. So they have to take on a debt for that, and the French can get rid of their units. Roll for gold for Spain. This is a freebie. The Spanish get a prestige, and luckily there is one left. That puts them up to the 8. Too bad they didn't have that before the thing. Roll for trade. I didn't recruit. Shit. Hold on. Let's go back. Well, I'll just take that away from the Spaniards. If they'll end up getting a unit, they'll get one less unit. Really want on the units. Really want to get another card. They can get 2 cards if they succeed, but I'm going to make sure that I get the 1. I think it's worth losing a point of debt just to make absolutely certain that we get that extra card. So we'll be getting 2 cards at peace with Spain. That improves my chances a great deal. I mean, it's possible I could draw Portugal twice, but instead I get that, which is helpful, and that, which is helpful. So Portugal did not come up, and I'll want to get those cards into play, as many as possible. So that's the Dutch trade. We're at unrest. Wow. Losing units, not a bad deal. Taking debt on might be a big deal. So I got to think about this a little bit. We paid 2 units each to draw 2 cards just to make sure we could get the best we can. Claims plus tolerance is greater than debt. You know, if I do this, I can increase tolerance by 1 for 2 debt. That's not a great deal, right? I don't think that's on my... I don't think there's any debt reduction for tolerance. Wait a minute. Rights and prestige. Tolerance does reduce for Sweden, as do liberties. So if Sweden took on 2 debt, they could get both. They could pay it off. So that's worth doing, except, well, it's possible that that tolerance could go down from some other means. So they're convincing France, hey, you pay a debt, I'll pay a debt, and we'll both take that card. So they each we'll pay for that card between us. We have to take 2 debt between us. We do that. We increase the tolerance by 1. Now that puts the Liberties card at risk, and only France and Sweden have the opportunity to play that card right off the bat. They're not really interested in increasing liberties, so we're in an interesting position there. Because I would bet you Austria is actually interested in reducing liberties and then trading territories, because they must have liberties greater than tolerance to win. And both Bavaria and Austria are interested in Bavaria winning, but, you know, Austria now has a bigger hammer. Although, in a sense, because Austria controls the liberties track entirely, they could actually hold that hammer harder over the Austrians and say, look, you're just not going to win. So do I want to take that 2 debt or not? It actually hurts me to take that 2 debt on. So I would rather be trading territories away for liberties. So I am not going to pay for that card. Let me see if anyone else has an opportunity. I don't think they do. I don't think the Dutch, for example, have the ability to raise the liberties as an option. I think only France and Sweden can play on that. Austria does not want to take on debt just to increase the liberties, well, to reduce liberties, that they're going to Bavaria has to have liberties greater than tolerance. So Bavaria will not win without that. So I can guarantee either, hey, if we can't come to some agreement, neither of us wins, or whatever, it's better for me not to take that extra debt on, just to trade it back in a little bit. So that puts us to the final step, and now it's time for all the deals to kind of coalesce, whatever they are. And as we can see, there are a fair number of them, and it's going to be hard to track them all on video. Got rid of their trade cards with deals. Bavaria, they took Bavaria's troops or units, 3 of them, in exchange for giving them the better card, the big 4-point card. They actually gave France another 3-point card in exchange for a debt transfer. And they gave Austria a 2-point card in exchange for the debt transfer and an agreement not to trade it. So far, nobody has the allowance, the right to trade debt cards, commerce cards, except France and Spain. France does not particularly want to trade theirs away to Spain. They have 2 3s. They know they're not hurting the Dutch by holding those, and it helps them overall. So that's pretty sweet for them. These cards don't help the Dutch at all if they're in Dutch hands, so getting them all out there, this pair of 3s doesn't hurt them in France's hands, so they're good there. We still haven't come up with what the tolerance talks are yet, though. Thuringia is worth nothing to Sweden at this point, so they will gladly trade away a tolerance for Thuringia. Austria says to Bavaria, and here's the thing, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I got to get 2 of these. Austria looks to Bavaria and says, you know what, I want 2 of your areas. So Pomerania is an easy one to give, and we'll do this for 2 liberties. So Pomerania for 1 liberty is a fair trade. The other one, we're going to give Württemberg up, although Bavaria loves Württemberg, for another liberty. We can get away with this because we know our authoritarian threshold is 6. That gets our territory threshold below what we want. And we've gotten Bavaria enough liberties that they're okay. What else is left? That's a good question. Some people may have some extra units that they could get something for. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The French actually kind of can use all their units. The Bavarians traded theirs away to the Dutch. Everyone else has a fair amount of units. We have an odd number here. I don't remember. Divide by 2 round fractions up, so we're better off keeping the odd numbers. People could trade one away for a debt. That's a possibility. So France will give, they'll take a Swedish unit and take some Swedish debt on in exchange for that. That doesn't hurt, and that doesn't hurt France, and it helps Sweden a little bit. We're a little worried about Sweden because they had to give up some territory. Anyone else? Bavaria has an extra. Austria could take that extra on, but it doesn't actually help them. So they're not really willing to do it. So right now it's Austria and Spain each have 1. That's fine. I don't see anybody else really being willing to shift 1, because nobody's at an even number who wants to. The Dutch could take 1 from Bavaria and shift a debt. But the Dutch feel like they're probably winning. So I think we're actually done and ready to go to the final countdown, as it were. All right, let me take a little break, and then we'll go through that. That's going to be mainly a mechanistic process. There's not much going on here. debt resolution. This is where things kind of end. First fluctuation. Again, like I said, this is mechanical. We got a 6 and a 2. Everybody gets 2 extra debt. Let's throw those on. Yeah. These numbers are going to be shifting around quite a bit. So, commerce. Everyone looks at their commerce cards and reduces the debt by that. So, because of the deals that were made, these are reduced. 6 for the French. Austrians and the Swedes, who I think have a 3. Okay. Taxes. Taxes is kind of the cool part. Sweden and Bavaria reduced by the amount of territories they possess in the Holy Roman Empire, but only of their religion. So the Swedes, 1, 2, 3, 4, lose 5. You can see these numbers are going way down, right? Bavaria, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Austria, the number of areas that do not possess any Swedish, French, or Bavarian claims. This can be a big number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 debt goes away. Wow. So Austria cleaned themselves up. The French, the number of areas that do possess a French, Swedish, or Bavarian claim, which is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Remember, that's the number that Austria basically was able to negotiate for. Now, whether or not players could catch that and just throw a monkey wrench in, that's part of what goes on in the game, and we didn't really see that happen, but that's okay. In the Netherlands, the Dutch reduced theirs by the number of points of territory they personally own. Well, remember, they made that trade, so they're able to get rid of 2 of their debt. They could have maybe traded more territories. And now Spain and France compare their holdings to see who has the most claims, but this includes the the Dutch, so that's 4 to 4. So the French win that. They're able to get rid of 5 debt for that. Spain's not looking too happy. And now half the remaining units, including ships, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, that's going to be 4 debt. Only 1. Poor Spain. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. That's going to be 7 debt for the French that goes away. 8 is 4 debt. See those debt numbers going way down. 1, 2, 3, and 2. Okay. Rights and privileges. All players reduced by the amount of prestige they have. So that's 3 debt. Here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're down to 25. We got to get it 1 less, or else we can't win. 1 debt. And then 3 debt here. Okay. Sweden reduces, I think Spain loses, by the way, which means Austria loses. Sweden reduces its debt by the sum of its tolerance and liberty tracts. That's 2. 5 off for Sweden. The Dutch, the tolerance track. That's 2 off for the Dutch. Bavaria, the Liberties track, and the number of recatholicized areas. Okay, so Liberties is at 3, 4, 5, 6. We're at negative debt. That's fine. As long as it's 0, it's okay. Now we look at victory conditions. Okay, is Liberties greater than tolerance? Yes, Austria arranged that for Bavaria. And the sum of liberties and Bavarian claims is greater than the Bavarian debt. So the Bavarians win the game. But Spain has less than 25 debt. Spain does not win the game, which means Austria is not going to win the game. Austria, well, their thresholds. They met their territory threshold. They met their authoritarian threshold, 5 to 6. Their debt threshold they easily met, but Spain didn't win. So the Austrians lose the game as well. And we'll put them over there for that. Card. Put back with the other cards. The Dutch trade agreements are greater than the Dutch debts. They are. I haven't. I moved the trade agreements, but there were more than 4 out there, so the Dutch win the game. Sweden, tolerance and Swedish claim greater than Swedish debts. 6 here for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The Swedes win the game. For the French, their debt is less than 20, and both the Dutch and Swedes won the game. So, Spain and Austria did not win the game, which means we don't go into some kind of overtime. We're in kind of like a 4-way tie here. To some extent, I would say, because of France and Austria's special, they can almost never win unless at least 2 other players win. I kind of look at this as more of a French victory than anything else, but that's just my personal take on it. This is 4 people sharing the victory, as it were. And so that's the way it ends. What can I say about things? Yeah, I mean, the biggest part is that not being able to win unless other players win aspect of it makes certain powers feel a little harder to negotiate a win for. You know, I mean, obviously, look, Bavaria was able to win, but Austria was not because of Spain. For France to win, it means the Dutch and the Swedes had to win. The one exception to that being if everybody wins, but in a sense, that means as France, you're trying to make Dutch and Swedes win still. You're just hoping that you can beat them out on the final victory charting. How do you analyze this, whatever? To me, this just doesn't turn out to be a very competitively aligned game. It's not like diplomacy, which is, again, a game with a lot of negotiation in it, but in theory, at least, diplomacy has you play this out until one person wins or not. The one exception to that being, if everybody throws in the towel in diplomacy, everybody who's on the board wins. I think that's actually in the rules, which means that favors a sort of buddy dip type game, which is similar to what this has. So I don't find it all that horrible to face something like that. I'm used to that. Maybe that's a house rule that we play with, just because we're never able, games of diplomacy don't end, basically. It's basically a matter of people throwing the towel and say, well, whatever. But this has that same sort of feel to it, except that you're kind of locked into the position by which power you are. Those powers that are able, that do want other players or need other players to win in order to win, well, they're in kind of this interesting position where, they tend to be somewhat more powerful, so the Austrians control these two important tracks. The French have armies in both areas. So they're kind of more interesting to play, and their victory conditions are more interesting in a sense. So that's kind of the thing. Now, had Spain been one less on their debt, and if I had pre-calculated everything, man, we got a low roll for the turbulence, I would have been able to say, wow, Spain's really in trouble, and Austria, can you help me? You know, and cut some sort of deal. Even just Austria saying, I'll take some of Spain's debt because I'm pretty sure I can win, but I'm not sure Spain can win. Then everybody would have won, and thus only one person would win. And that would be calculated. Let's see if I can find this. That would have been calculated through, this is the cheap thing, based on victory points for various things, like Catholic powers get victory points for certain things, Protestants get for others. So you would count how many Catholic areas there are versus how many Protestant areas, and the tolerance track figures in and everything. And that's kind of an interesting feature to the game. I actually suspect that as you play this more, and if you play it very calculatingly, it's going to be hard to prevent everybody from winning, so these become more important. I kind of don't like the idea of really ultra calculating, and you can see I didn't do it ultra. I did it to some extent, but, you know, obviously Spain could have been able to tell, I am not going to be able to win. And they could have turned to Austria and said, I'm not going to be able to win. I need this. And Austria has the choice of either not winning along with Spain or giving in to them. Kind of like they were able to do with Bavaria, where they're like, you know, we've got to come to a deal here, and it doesn't help me to make the deal if I'm not going to win as well. Well, Spain and Austria probably would have come to a similar deal. So I think with everybody focusing on their own victory conditions, it's going to be very hard to cut one person out. We were pretty close to everybody winning as it was. Now, again, that was with a low turbulence roll. Turbulence roll of 1 would have changed that whole thing. Everybody would be one debt less. Which would actually hurt somebody like Bavaria who cleared their debt, right? They don't get the extra advantage from that. Let's take a look at what that would work out as had we been there, because we were pretty damn close. And I've got a few minutes. So let's see. Catholic power score 1 victory point for each Catholic area in the Holy Roman Empire. Okay, well that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 points for Catholicism. Minus the tolerance track plus the number of Swedish or Dutch claim. I can't remember my number. It was like 14, right? 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yeah, I get 15 this time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15, 13, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we're at 6 for the Catholic powers. And I'll put that here. The Protestants only get victory points equal to the tolerance track. Well, that's only 2. The major powers, 1 for each unrest card left in the deck. Well, crap. We only played 2, so that's a lot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And again, France kind of wants to leave those cards in there. Sweden, who has some effect on it, kind of wants to get them played. Minor powers, victory points equal to the liberties track, which is 3. HRE, all the powers get a number of victory points equal to the Austria card, which, crap, I kind of disappeared that, didn't I? I think it's this top one. So that would be 4 points. Okay, so then we look at each power and we see what they have. So they are minor Protestant. So they end up with 3 9 points. We'll give them 9. This is again making the estimate, or making, saying this was 1 less. So they will get major Catholic, which means 6 plus 6 is 12 points. Is Spain's. And this favors the Catholic powers, this design. Major Catholic, same thing, 12 points. So France and Spain would then be tied. Well, ties would be based on this, which remember is tradable, but isn't worth anything except for this tie. So France would win the tie between Spain and France. Only one person wins under these conditions. Bavaria is a minor Catholic Holy Roman Empire. Catholic is 6. See, they have 3. 9, 10, 11, 12. They're at 13. So now Bavaria is in the lead at 13. Austria, major Catholic Holy Roman Empire, which is 6, 12, 15, 16 points. So Austria would have won out of all the players. And then the Swedes, major Protestant Holy Roman Empire. Protestant wasn't worth much. 2, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. They'd have been in with Spain and France kind of in a second place. Of course, there is no second place. It would come to this order, so we would come in like 4th out of everyone. But that's just to give you an idea of what would have happened if I rolled a 1 here. Then Spain would have won as well. Austria would have won as well. And therefore, we get thrown to that special kind of victory condition. I think that special kind of victory condition is probably... So what my guess is if you play without much pre-calculation on that, especially on the final turn, or without as much deal making as could possibly happen, you might end up in a situation like we had, where a couple of players don't win, or even just one. But it's possible Austria or France could not win, and then you might have like 5 winners. If you play, I think, a little bit more calculation-wise, it's going to be fairly likely that everybody wins. But then as you start playing it more and more, I think you start to get to positions, and again, this is just guesstimate because every group is going to play this differently and everything. You start getting into positions where players are actually targeting one player to make sure that they don't win so that they can make sure they win. Or if somebody has particular goals in mind, right, and is really, really up on the game, they might target to be the sole winner because maybe that's their goal instead of, let's make sure I win. So depending on your philosophy of victory in the game and whatever, you're going to cause differences to occur. Now, part of my philosophy of victory is I didn't have to calculate much. I didn't do much pre-calculating, so that actually adds to my enjoyment of the game. So I might end up being the one person who loses because, like Spain here, I didn't figure out that, oh wow, if I could just shift some debt into Austria's hands, I'm almost assured of victory. And I kind of like the naive play the best. And I think when I play it solo, that's always going to be how I do it. But if I'm playing opposed, I'm probably a little bit more cutthroat and a little bit more competitive. And I'm not sure which way I'd go. I think I'd probably go for I want to make sure I win, so I'd try to cut one player from winning, rather than I want to make sure that I'm the only person that wins. I kind of view a whole bunch of people winning and one person not as being worth the effort, but the amount of engineering involved to try to make sure that I am the sole person who wins. And here's another factor with it. Being the sole person who wins, there's probably an advantage to being Catholic
or you know, you can see they generated a lot of points. The major powers generated a lot of points. France has absolute control over how many of those revolution cards turn over. They can refuse to pay their unit and just prevent those from happening. So they can guarantee that goes up to 8 or whatever. Anyway, that's a look at it. Again, I don't think it's a terribly competitive game. I think it's more of an interesting experiment. And that's kind of how Tom was representing it, as this was a highly experimental game. But it's these interesting experiments that excite me more than, like, you know, you could have a highly competitive game that I'm just like, well, it turns out to be a puzzle, you know? Here, because each player's personal view of victory is going to influence what they do, you get that kind of oddness in there. Just like with a game of 18xx, which we're coming up to something similar soon. Just like with a game of 18xx, somebody might view second place as better than a very slim shot at first place, you know? And that can influence the decision making in a game with no luck. This game has some luck in it, but I don't feel like the luck's all that important. I think it's really more the nature of how the different players interact and what their philosophies are and how willing they are to make deals for what purposes and everything. I think that's what drives the game, and that's very cool to me. Much cooler than, you know, a Euro point optimization type design. All right, let's send this one up.